We're going to welcome to the stage James Nislau.
Nimlos.
Hello, I am James Nimlos, and this is my presentation, how Webflow scales its monorepo to bring superpowers for everyone to build for the web. I am a staff software engineer at Webflow, working on developer productivity. All right. So if you didn't know, Webflow is a platform for building and managing websites at all levels of complexity. It is a web experience platform. The majority of Webflow application is housed in a single monorepo. It's got almost 4 million lines of TypeScript and JavaScript. That's not the node modules. That's everything except node modules. And this is in about 25,000 files. And we have 704 NX projects. And last week, we merged 319 pull requests by 109 different people. A brief history. In 2012, Vlad made the first commit to this repository, and it is the same repository we use today. There are still lines that you can blame Vlad on. Now, over time, they modernized. It was jQuery, monolith, Node.js server. Then they added Webpack, Babel, et cetera. In 2016, they added Cypress to enable writing end-to-end tests. Webflow was bootstrapped, meaning it was fully self-funded until 2019 when it first raised capital. When you're scrappy like that, things like build system usually go by the wayside. It's volunteer hours, effectively. And so by 2021, people were really gung-ho about writing those end-to-end tests, and they wrote 2,500. And deploys could be up to 2 hours, which is absolutely atrocious. It was just uncomfortable, right? These tests were slow, they were flaky. Developers stopped trusting them. They were just hitting retry over and over until it would get it working. However, we made a concerted effort to make this better, and we got deploys down to 15 minutes by 2023, 2 years later. And that was while multiplying our Cypress tests to 6,000. Wow, James, how did you get your builds to 15 minutes from you?
How did you get your build to 15 minutes?
Thank you. Well, we spent a bunch of money. Because it's not entirely accurate. Obviously, we didn't just spend a bunch of money, and it took us 2 years. We parallelized all the things, which if you've done this at your own homegrown situation, especially without a tool like NX, you're getting just an incredible number of simultaneously running jobs. And if you'll notice, I've highlighted that this build passed in over 21 minutes, which is more than 15, which I just said we got to, right? Well, this was the same year that we got to 15 minutes, and developers are still writing code. Won't they just stop already? So, yeah, it was an unwinnable battle, right? We were just continually fighting, trying to add more agents to take on more shards and to try to keep the build down to 15 minutes, but it wasn't scaling. And so really, we hit a wall, right? We were just constantly battling, and we couldn't get it lower than 15 minutes. So we needed new technology. We needed something to help us manage this. So we did our research. Now, this is very specific comparison to our needs. I would not take this as some sort of general tools, right? Overall, we analyzed 13 different tools. About half of them were unmaintained, and so they seemed like easy rejections. in regards to this, I would definitely look at the framework across the top that we use. We looked at how these different tools might impact developer iteration. Very bad. Double arrow negative, right? But then, NX, Turborepo, Bazel, RushStack, these were all going to improve how fast developers could iterate. Some a little bit more than others, potentially. Then we looked at developer disruption. Obviously, if we just left everything the same, developers wouldn't need to go through a migration phase. However, we would never improve. And so there's obviously some developer disruption with migrating, but it's acceptable compared to what benefits we're getting, right? There's cost, the total cost to migrate. This is both any actual costs you end up spending towards a company, consultancy, and effort that your developers put in to get it to this point. Then there's the ongoing cost of maintenance, how much time you have to put into maintaining the tools that you build for it. And then finally, of course, there's the overall ending system complexity. Is the system better? Is it less complex? Is it easier to navigate for your average developer, right? For us, the differentiating feature was the built-in workspace analysis. We could turn on NX, and then we could immediately start filtering out these irrelevant tests that we were running in 300 jest shards, right? Here was our overall migration timeline. So I spent about a month planning and doing all this analysis and research, and then we needed to normalize our code base. We ended up, plugging in NX and refactoring a little bit, and then we really started diving in and more completely integrating with NX. So when we got started, we really needed to normalize our code base, right? Specifically, our custom system. We had our own custom Monorepo library management system, and it allowed for projects to be nested within each other. That was an explicit original requirement. However, that wasn't really compatible with how NX worked, and so we needed to normalize them and flatten them. Then, of course, we moved on to using NX affected with our existing system. So we haven't migrated from BuildKite. We still have our own custom pipeline generator, et cetera, but we use NX in front of it. We wrap it in NX, wrap the pipeline generation so that we can start seeing what types of results we can get, and we can start making progress on this sort of unwinnable effort. Even though it is less effective than if we had a fully integrated, fully implemented NX plugins, et cetera, it was still worth it to sort of get something going, see something happen. So then we're going to more full integration, right? This is when we're removing our bespoke build system, our scripts, and we're using the NX CLI, and we're starting to define these same scripts that we had sort of ad hoc throughout our code base and in shell scripts, and we started putting them as NX targets and making some consistency. Then we started actually migrating to NX plugins that are available for install. And then, of course, there's the complete migration. It's replacing all of the strange bespoke things that we have with NX executors and plugins. To be honest, we're not done with that, and we might never be. We definitely still have a grunt task that runs in our CI. Oops. That was an extra slide. So lastly, as part of this complete integration, we added remote caching. So we replaced our custom caching system with a custom task runner and caching in S3. And that was, bit by bit, we're sort of getting into the NX world and following these conventions and being able to take advantage of all of the sort of consistency in this realm that NX has created. And then we slowly started enabling build and test caching. So because we had this custom system, we didn't have these inputs, these correctly defined inputs and outputs. In fact, we still have a public folder at the root of our monorepo, and that's where some of our front-end applications live. They aren't actually still served as a list of JavaScript files put directly into the HTML. They're bundled, et cetera, but because of inertia, we just haven't gotten to a place where we can move them. But NX is okay with that. It sort of let us define these weird things and keep going. So specific challenges. It's me. So really, it was our own legacy code for the most part that was holding us back. That's what takes the most time when sort of getting it together and merging with NX. And so my recommendations would be migrate sooner than later if this is something you're looking into. And secondly, any consistent system is better than no system, right? So Jonathan was saying in the previous presentation, getting conventions and conformance and defining that and making sure that your projects are following these conventions is very important. Also, how to have this smooth migration. So the worst case is that you have a new build system and you're hyping it up, and then you forget a implicit dependency or a target input, and suddenly everything breaks. It's in dev. All the developers are complaining that their local won't start, et cetera, right? So what we had implemented is both we used a merge queue, and we used affected to skip steps, to skip tests on the PR builds. However, we still ran everything when it was in the queue. And this enabled us to have this extra fail-safe. Even though it was going to cost a little bit extra, that added safety was really worth it. And secondly, we just disabled caching to start. We just didn't even turn it on until we were really feeling very comfortable with how we define these things. And then again, we enabled it methodically and purposefully. We only turned it on in PR builds, and we have not yet enabled it in the merge queue or deploy or production deploys. So what was our return on investment, right? How can you, I really want to, as part of this talk, hopefully you can use this to bring back to your own organization if you're having trouble evangelizing and prioritizing some sort of a migration to a tool. We saw a 48% decrease in AWS CI costs. And we saw some builds that would take only 7 minutes. And then our median build time got to 20 minutes. And you're probably saying, wait, weren't you just already at 20 minutes? Well, it was 21.5 or something, it's a 6% decrease. It's okay, it's not super great. But I want to bring you back to our migration timeline. Those results actually came from here. And actually, we're over here now, right? And so where are we now? We're actually at 12.8-minute median builds, having continued our integration with NX as we continuously deliver results and able to show sort of what we're getting at. On top of that, we've seen an amazing increase in developer productivity using sort of this, using NX. And again, I'm not purposefully just evangelizing NX, that's the tool we chose, but we saw a 68% increase in mean deploys per week over the last 6 months. We've seen a 22% decrease in change lead time. This is the time between the first commit on a PR to when it's actually deployed into production. And then very significantly, we saw a 31% decrease in change failure rates over that those 6 months. Right, we're talking actually, in this case, we're talking about a 3% to 2% change failure rate, which is still very great, right? And this is very important for us because we are definitely still in the phase transitioning from a startup to an enterprise. And we really need to show to those large customers that we care about how consistent and stable our product is. what were our overall lessons learned? So, of course, one, migrating is absolutely worth it. If you are existing in a monorepo that doesn't have one of these amazing tools that's out there, you should really start looking into them and trying to see what it might take to get it implemented. Obviously, our results substantiated our effort, but it wasn't known beforehand. We had some really good guesses, potentially, but we were sort of hoping. And hopefully you could also use our results to say, look, this is one example, and they were a legacy code base, and they implemented one of these great tools, and they saved substantial amounts of money. Second is that actually the NX project graph is not all-knowing. So this is something that I didn't realize before, but the project graph doesn't include target inputs. And my preference, looking at it from a fully free customer, because we are not paying NX yet, is that a combined project target graph would cut some of the waste for us, because we're still spinning up some of these agents to run these tasks that then find that the cache, that it's okay to use the cache, and they just run that. Now, I do have to say also that using NX Cloud and using DTE completely alleviates this issue because it's reusing agents, et cetera, which is a much more efficient way of running the system. So, quick questions. Yes, you over there. It's correct. Webflow is hiring. If you are interested in applying, we are fully remote. We are hiring for DevOps, site reliability, front end, back end, all levels from early career to staff. And if you see a job that you're interested in, we recommend that you apply even if you don't meet 100% of the qualifications. The URL is webflow.com/careers. And that is it. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions or would like to talk further about this, feel free to email me at james.nimlos@webflow.com. You can talk about the presentation, or if you're interested in Webflow, or you're just interested in career progression or whatever, feel free to reach out. Thanks.